Good evening and welcome to another one of our hybrid events. Guys, you'll come on in. Let's Clare Pooley, John Boyne, everyone. Such an honor to be hosting this wonderful event. We've made a little bit of a name for ourselves with the virtual and now the hybrid, and so it's such a wonderful honor for Transworld to give us this opportunity to host this launch. So thank you to everyone who's come out tonight in the pouring rain. I don't know wherever the virtual crowd are in the world. It's pouring in Tring at the moment. So, but thank you so much to everyone. I will be sat over there, sort of liaising with the virtual crowd. I will be asking for questions from that crowd. So, virtual crowd, use the Q&A function, please. The rest of you, it's like the old-fashioned days. You put your hand up and you ask a question. But Claire will be handling that. So, without further ado, I'll hand you over to Clare Pooley and John Boyne.
Thank you. It is such an honour to have John with us this evening, all the way from Dublin in Ireland. And he really does need no introduction, but I'm going to embarrass him by doing one anyway. So apologies, right, John. But John was born in Dublin. He studied at Trinity College Dublin and then creative writing at UAE. He's published 12 novels for adults and 6 novels for younger readers, including the runaway phenomenon that is The Boy in Striped Pajamas, which was a New York Times #1 bestseller. It was adapted into a film, which you've probably seen, as well as a play, a ballet, and even an opera, I understand, and has sold 11 million copies worldwide. And as of this year, it's been in the New York Times top 10 bestseller list for 15 years, which is an absolutely astonishing achievement. His novels are published in 50 languages, and amongst his most popular books are The Heart's Invisible Furies, which is, I have to say, one of my all-time favorite novels, A Ladder to the Sky, and My Brother's Name is Jessica. In 2012, he was awarded the Hennessy Literary Hall of Fame Award for his work, and he's also won 3 Irish Book Awards and many, many international literary awards. So it is a huge honor. And today is publishing day for The Echo Chamber, John's latest novel, which is, I'll read you a description here. It's been described as a satiric helter-skelter, a dizzying downward spiral of action and consequence, poised somewhere between farce, absurdity, and oblivion. But the description that really got me hooked was a film agent who described it as like Schitt's Creek on acid, which I thought definitely made it sound up my street. And it was. I mean, I found it completely laugh out loud. So I apologize to my husband, who I kept awake many evenings, chortling away at John's writing. It's beautifully written. It really makes you think about social media, about celebrity, about political correctness and cancel culture. And like all of John's books, it leaves you sort of a little bit changed after you put it down. You know, I really felt like I was a slightly different person having read his latest book, as I have with all of his books. So yes, let's ask John to talk a little bit about the book, and then he's going to give us a short reading to give you a flavour of what it's all about. So over to you, John.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Firstly, can I say, 17 months ago, I was sitting in a bar in Adelaide, in Australia, having just finished taking part in the festival there. And I was reading on my laptop about something called COVID, and thinking, this seems like it's turning into something. And I had a whole, as I'm sure we all did, had a whole year of plans and things I was doing. And from the time I left the Adelaide Festival until this very night, I haven't been in a room with readers. I haven't given a reading. I haven't been at a festival. And it's actually quite emotional to feel like the world is coming back to normal. And it's so wonderful to see readers here tonight, and, you know, to just be in a room with readers again. So thank you all for coming. So The Echo Chamber is a comic novel. At least I think it's a comic novel. It's supposed to be funny. And it's about the effect that social media has on all of our lives. The fact that we spend so much time on our phones, that our friends have been replaced by virtual friends, by followers, that our sense of validation sometimes comes from likes and the number of followers or blue ticks or whatever it is. It's a novel about a family called the Cleverleys. George and Beverly Cleverley are the parents. George is a 60-year-old chat show host at the BBC. Beverly Cleverley is a romantic novelist, and she gets ghosts to write her books. And then they have 3 children between 17 and 23, Nelson, Elizabeth, and Achilles. And all 5 members of the family are in some way affected. Their lives are affected by how much time they spend online. So that when dramas happen, when trouble happens in their life, which from the very start of the book, trouble happens, they no longer have each other to turn to, really. They are relying on a world that is virtual, that doesn't exist. So it's, while it is, I hope, full of jokes, it also, I think, has a point to make, which is that we're better off, being here together in person and talking in conversations than we are, shouting at each other online, really. I mean, anything's better than that, but...
Great.
Shall I read something then?
Give us a flavour.
I'm going to read a section from the center of the book. Nelson Cleverley is 23. He struggles with women. He really just can't talk to women at all. And the only way he can feel confident is by dressing in the uniforms of jobs that he doesn't do. So a doctor, or a nurse, or a fireman. And in this section, he's gone to a speed dating night, and he's dressed as a policeman. A few dozen people were gathered in the hall, most standing awkwardly on their own, staring at their phones, and Nelson glanced at his watch. He timed his arrival, thinking that proceedings would begin soon after he walked through the door, and perhaps because his clothing brought an air of authority into the room, a woman made her way towards the microphone stand immediately and leaned into it, obeying the constitutional obligation to ask, "Is this thing on?" so close to the grill that she sent a stab of reverb around the room. "Well, you're all very welcome here tonight," she said. "Some of you have been here before. Yes, I recognize you desperate people, but some of you are new. All of you, I expect, are a little nervous, but I hope you're excited too, because tonight might be the last night of your life." Her face exploded in happiness, and she broke into applause as people gathered, turned to look at her in confusion, uncertain whether they'd heard her correctly. No, I got that wrong, didn't I?" she said, frowning. "It's not the last night of your life. I mean, it might be, who's to say? Anything could happen. No, what I meant was, tonight might be the last night of the rest of your life." A groan from the audience. "No, that's not it either, is it? Oh dear, I'm so sorry, it's..." "For Christ's sake, Alice," shouted a woman from the audience, "you get it wrong every time. It's like handing a microphone to Mel Gibson when he's 6 hours into a bachelor party and asking him whether he'd like to go to Israel on his summer holidays." Yes, the first night of the rest of your life," replied Alice, looking apologetic, her face turning beetroot red. "The rest night of the first of your life. I do apologize. Now, let me begin by thanking you all for coming to our 6th speed dating night of 2021. It's such a pleasure to see so many lonely, miserable people, all hoping to find someone who might give their lives some meaning. It matters so much that you've come here tonight. You are the dreamers and we are the dreamers of the dreams. Love is strange. Many people take it for a game. Lonely, you might be Mr. Lonely or Miss Lonely, but you've got to have faith. You've got to have a faith. I say you've got to have faith if you want to dance with somebody who loves you. Can you feel the love tonight? It's a little bit funny, but I can." "She does this whole routine every time," said the woman standing next to Nelson, shaking her head in exasperation. "Honestly, there's times I want to press a pillow over her face. This feeling inside. Now, don't be worried if you say something stupid like 'I love you,' although you may not want to say that as you've only just met. But remember that each of you is beautiful. It's true in every single way. And you need to open your hearts to each other because one of you holds the lock and the other holds the key." "I think you better leave right now," shouted a man at the back of the room, and Nelson looked in his direction. He was big, bald, and burly, and had the number 22 on his sticker. "All right," said Alice, who had evidently reached the end of her speech and looked almost as relieved about that as everyone else. "Now, in the olden days," she continued, "back when men did all the DIY and women knew how to make a perfect Victoria sponge, we used to have 2 lines of seats, women on one side and men on the other. We're not allowed to do that anymore, of course, as it would contravene equality laws. And for all I know, some of you might be straight, some of you might be gay, and some of you might be homosexual. Which is fine. There's room for all sorts, no matter what your perversion. Some of you might not even know what you are. I ran one of these events recently in Battersea, and a man told me he was pansexual, and I had to go home and Google what that meant. But that was Battersea, so you know, you're up against it there. Anything goes. She beamed out at the audience, most of whom were shifting uncomfortably and wondering whether they could just make a break for it. Nelson watched as two people ripped off their badges and left the hall, and he considered doing the same thing, but he felt like he was driving slowly past the scene of a car crash. He didn't want to stare, but he just couldn't help it. Right, said Alice, leaning into the microphone again. So here's the way we do things now since equality came in. She made inverted comma symbols in the air when she said the word equality. You sit down wherever you like, and you talk to the person seated opposite you. Again, inexplicably, she signed inverted commas around the word opposite. Some will be the people of the gender to which you are attracted, and some will not. But no matter who's facing you, just have a chat. Talk as if you're normal, well-adjusted people. And when I ring the bell, which will be every few minutes, everyone moves one space to their left and starts talking to whoever's sitting opposite them then. Is that clear? Of course it is. Clear as mud, I hear you say. Anyway, it'll all become clear once we get started. So now, without any further ado, and unaccustomed as I am to speaking aloud, let me invite you all to take a seat. And when I ring the bell, just talk. Just talk. Just fucking talk, she implored. Now let the games begin. May the odds be ever in your favor. And to those who are about to die, we salute you. Everyone moved carefully towards the center of the hall, circling the seats slowly, like children playing musical chairs at a birthday party. And Nelson found himself in the center of the group, facing a perfectly nice-looking woman, only a few years older than him. The bell rang, they stared at each other and smiled. Apparently I'm number 16, said the woman in an aggressive tone, pointing towards her sticker. I'm not even worthy of a name, it seems. Typical. I'm number 37, replied Nelson. Oh, lucky you. Actually, number 16 is one of my favorite numbers. It's a perfect square. A what? You know, 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 4 is 16. You can't do anything with 37, it's a prime. I've always felt a little uncomfortable with primes. The woman snorted and shook her head. Nerd, she said. I bet you keep lists, don't you? To-do lists and so on. I do, as it happens, admitted Nelson. They can be very helpful. The woman laughed and placed her hands on her lap, each one positioned perfectly on a different knee. Christ, how has it come to this? She muttered, to no one in particular. It's been quite fine out for this time of year, hasn't it? Said Nelson. My father was a maths teacher, she said, ignoring his question. He was a nerd too. Really? Replied Nelson. I had a maths teacher when I was in school. It's a small world, isn't it? Yes, she said, but I wouldn't want to be the one to have to clean it. He frowned. What? He asked. I said, I wouldn't want to be the one who had to clean it. The world, I mean. Why would you clean the world? How could someone do that? No, it's a joke. When someone says, actually, you know what, forget it. Doesn't matter. Are you a cleaner? Asked Nelson. It's fine if you are. Oh, I'm so glad I have your approval. Thank Christ that a man is telling me it's okay to be a cleaner. So you are then? No, I'm a pediatrician. Oh, sorry, I'm not very good at this. It's my first time. I can tell. Are you enjoying it so far? Well, it's not been a great start. I'm not really enjoying it either, he said finally. Oh, I suppose that's my fault, is it? Men. Nelson opened his mouth and closed it again. He started to think about his quiet room at home and how nice it would be there to be there right now, lying on his bed, listening to some music and reading the latest Hilary Mantel. I didn't mean that, he said. My ex-husband, my first one, he always blamed me for everything too. He'd take me out to a restaurant and sit there saying nothing, then blame me for the silence. He said I have no personality, that the only people I could talk to are children. He sounds quite unpleasant, said Nelson. You were right to break up with him. I didn't. He broke up with me. And needless to say, he got married to someone 10 years younger before the ink was even dry on the divorce papers. I suppose you would say I was asking for it. I wasn't going to say anything of the sort, said Nelson. She sighed and looked away. So you're going to ask for my number or what? I know your number, said Nelson. It's your number 16, a perfect square. My phone number. Oh, no, I don't think so. She laughed bitterly. See? Well, it's just that we've started talking and I can do a lot better than you anyway. I mean, if you want to give it to me, I don't. All right then. Fortunately, just as the perspiration began to break out on Nelson's back, the bell rang and they all moved down a seat. Now Nelson was faced with number 22, the man who'd been shouting at Alice when she was making her introductory remarks. Don't get any ideas, Romeo, he said immediately, holding up a hand. I'm as straight as they come. I've had more women than you've had hot dinners. Oh, I am too, replied Nelson. I'm here to meet a nice lady. Then you've come to the wrong place. So we've got 3 minutes, nothing much to do. What do you want to talk about? Nelson drummed his fingers on his knee. I don't know, he said. Perhaps we could discuss politics. Bollocks to that, replied number 22. Books? I don't read books. What's the point? None of it ever happened. It's all made up. Do you watch television? No, 50,000 channels and nothing on. Do you travel much? Asked Nelson. I go to Norwich once a month, he conceded, to visit my Aunt Ida. She had a fall a while back, broke her hip. You'll see her off in the end, fingers crossed. You watch the footy? I'm not much of a sports fan, said Nelson, although I do enjoy Wimbledon when it's on. The bell rang again and he moved on to the next seat. Am I going? A little bit more. Now he was seated opposite a woman old enough to be his grandmother, who, somewhat cheerfully, had brought her knitting with her. He looked at her, trying to remember who she reminded him of, and then it came to him, the Queen Mother, who'd been dead for years, of course, but still, the resemblance was uncanny. I'm Nelson, he said, raising his voice, assuming she was deaf. No need to shout, dear, said the woman, and no names. It's all anonymous here, remember? Like AA, which I'm also a member of, as it happens. Of course. Nice to meet you, number one. Oh, you must have been the first one here. I always am, she said, click-clacking away with her needles. I try to come early so I can look at all the men as they arrive. I rate them in my head on a scale of 1 to 10, and then I make sure to put extra effort in when I'm sitting opposite the ones who scored high. It saves a lot of time. I see, said Nelson. And what number did I get? You're a 5, dear. Maybe a 6. A sort of any port in a storm type. Still a policeman. That's impressive. Brought your truncheon, have you? She giggled like a manic pixie. Said Nelson, to be polite. I would have thought a policeman could have his pick of women. No, sadly no. We're very manly, of course, and fearless, but no. When did you last arrest someone? Yesterday, he lied. Down Bridge End. She winked at him. I bet you'd like to put me in handcuffs, wouldn't you? He said again. Don't blush, dear. You don't stand a chance. Do you know I once had sex with a royal? I didn't know that, no, said Nelson, but then we've only just met. It was Lord Lucan, she said. Strictly speaking, Lord Lucan wasn't a member of the royal family. He was a member of the House of Lords. Oh, but it's all the same thing, isn't it? She said. This was before he murdered the nanny, of course, and disappeared up the Swanning. Of course, said Nelson. What was he like? He didn't have much of a sense of humor, but they don't tend to, do they? Lords? No, murderers. Oh, I suppose not. But he was quite the tiger in bed, since you've asked. He enjoyed water sports, but then so do I. You know what they say? Wild women do, and they don't regret it. Do you like water sports? And my parents took me to Euro Disney when I was a child, replied Nelson, and I enjoyed the slide. You know, the one that goes round and round, and you land in the swimming pool with a big splash? The old woman stared at him and shook her head. Oh my, she said. You're quite the innocent, aren't you? All right, that's not long.
Thank you. I think that gives a great flavour of the book. John, could you tell us a bit about the inspiration for the echo chamber and where it came from?
I could. About 3 years ago, I guess, I published a novel for young readers. As you probably know, I move between adults and young people in my books. And I published a novel for young readers called My Brother's Name is Jessica, which was a novel about a transgender teen. And it was narrated by the teen's 12-year-old brother, who was watching the experience of seeing the person he'd always thought of as his older brother transitioning into his older sister. And over the course of the summer was kind of coming to terms with this. But in the early parts of the book is confused and upset and not always as kind as he could be. But, you know, it's a novel with, you know, a novel of empathy and compassion. So the novel works that by the end of the book, he's come to terms with this and he realizes his sister is the same person she's always been, just different body, a different name. And when the book came out, or rather just before the book came out, it started to get quite a savaging online by people who made a virtue of the fact that they hadn't read the book, that they wouldn't read the book because it was so terrible, which kind of like is very odd in my head. I don't understand that one. And it became, what started off as something I didn't pay too much attention to, became quite a trauma over a year. Because what I found was, I had been on social media for, you know, I don't know, 10 years or something. And I had never really had any difficulties on it. I'd never had, the books I'd published before had never been particularly controversial in any way. Not even Boy in the Striped Pajamas, but there was no social media then. I don't, you know, if it was now, God only knows. But I was suddenly sort of thrust into this world where strangers were screaming abuse at me 24/7, issuing death threats, posting pictures of my house, telling me not to go out alone at night, telling me all the ways that they would wish I would die, and finishing all of these tweets practically with the hashtag be kind. And the mistake that I made a lot of the time was answering these people, and saying, I don't understand why you are so aggressive towards me. You haven't read this book. The book is, I'm hardly going to write a book that is filled with hatred. I'm hardly going to do that. The book could be a masterpiece, or it could be the worst book ever written, but it's written from the point of view of compassion. Of course it is. A publishing house isn't going to publish some diatribe. And it just really baffled me how many people would behave like that. And I wanted to understand why people behaved like that, and I wanted to understand why I felt the need to respond so much. And particularly with the what I call the long-term stalkers. There was a chap who tweeted about me 1,134 times over a year. Often, like at most 18 times in one day. But when somebody is tweeting 1,100 times about you in a year, and almost every tweet is made up, it'll be a quote. They'll put in quotes something that I've said, which I've never said. If you say it, or scenarios that have never happened. And if you repeat these kind of things over and over, well, it becomes reality, it becomes truth. If I tweeted every day for a year, that you eat kittens for breakfast, and I did it 365 times or 1,100 times, at some point, someone's going to say, "It's no smoke without fire." She probably does. And I found like the whole social media platforms are so unmonitored in that way that there was a reason why Donald Trump chose Twitter, say, as his means of communication with his audience, and why he could get away with so much racism and misogyny and lies. I mean, the lies, I think, are at the heart of it, that people can say anything, it seems, and they don't care. And in the worst cases, we've seen it happen, where in the worst cases, people are so pushed to the edge by the way they're treated on social media that they take their own lives. And we see that sometimes with celebrities, and sometimes we see it with young people, with teenagers. I've been recognizing with friends of mine who have teenage children, the pressure on those children when they post something on Instagram. If they don't get the requisite number of likes, if the right kid in the class hasn't liked it, someone else isn't going to like it until someone else does. And suddenly, am I on the outs? Have I done something wrong? And the pressure on them is like nothing that I had when I was at school. So I really wanted to write about it. I wanted to understand it. And when I'm interested in a subject and I want to understand it, I tend to write a novel about it.
Thank you.
So it's a long answer to a simple question. But...
No, it's important. And I mean, I noticed that you're off Twitter now. And is that permanent, do you think? Is social media something that you don't want to engage with anymore? Or?
I don't want to engage with it in the same way that I once did. I've been off it for the last 6 weeks in the run-up to the book coming out. And today I said the book is out, because, you want to just announce the book is out and you try to sell a few copies, so, but in the last, I would say, since Jessica, since, 2 years ago, I've never been on Facebook. I've mostly used Twitter for one reason and one reason only, which is reading something that I like and saying, I'm reading this book, I like it, like just promoting books. I would never engage in talking anything political, or anything that you can have an opinion about. There's no point. You can say the most innocuous thing, and there's people that are looking to attack you for it. I could say, it was raining in Tring, and somebody will accuse me of hating the people of Tring or something. It's you can say it's sunny, and they'll accuse you of being a climate change denier. It's like it doesn't matter what. The trick is to think before you post anything, and to make it as like. If you just, as I do, use it to talk about books that you like, you can't really get into too much trouble. But never drink and tweet, I would say. There should be some sort of app for that. That if you can't like multiply 6-digit numbers by themselves in your head or something, you can't.
And what would you advise anybody else who goes through that sort of awful experience that you had when the sort of Twitter mob pile on? I mean, how would you suggest they deal with it?
Don't respond. That's the simplest way. Do not reply. When complete strangers attack you, the fault is on their part. They're the ones who are odd. You know, if you were walking down the street and, you know, somebody just suddenly started to scream at you, chances are you're going to walk on. You're not going to stay and engage. And that's what I think you should do. They get tired of it eventually if you are not responding. What they want is for you to respond. They want you to respond and to get into an argument with them, and for them to feel then that you have validated their voices in some way. There is nothing to be gained by, and I pulled my hand up. I made plenty of mistakes on this myself, responding. And I mean, a writer does have the right to defend his or her own work, of course. But there's just, you know, if it's like a made-up name and an anime picture, and they've got 4 followers, and, you know, what is the point of engaging in an argument with them? It's a waste of everybody's energy. So I would say, don't respond, don't read your notifications.
It must be terribly hard, though, when you feel that somebody's getting at you, not to sort of stand up for yourself. But I can see that it only makes things worse. It
only makes things worse. But if you respond, then you wake up the next morning and you think, at some point I'm going to click on that little app, and there's going to be God knows how many responses waiting for me. And you could get like 99 people saying something really nice to you, and it'll be the one person who just says something awful. And you could just be having a terrible day. You know, something could be happening in your own life. Something, you could have just woken up feeling really bad about yourself for some reason. And that one thing can be the thing that just pushes you over the edge.
Yeah.
And you just go, you know what, and I think in 2021, especially after the last 18 months that, you know, we've shared as a species, so many people suffer or deal with, you know, mental health issues, with self-esteem issues, you know. So many people, myself included, you know, are on medication for things like that. And people forget that if you tweet something really vile and nasty, like, you know, wouldn't it be great if John Boyne fell under a tram? That they'll forget it a moment later. But you might think to yourself, you know what? Yeah, it probably would be. And there's a quote at the front of the book by John Ronson from So You've Been Publicly Shamed. It says, "The snowflake never has to feel responsible for the avalanche." And I think it's such a great line, because that's the thing. The one person who says something goes on about their day, and they have no idea what the recipient of their violence is going to feel.
Yeah, so true. But the Cleverleys go through all of this. You know, we see in the novel all of the behaviour that you've talked about in a way that is incredibly funny, but also, you know, incredibly impactful. And but it's not as simple as good versus evil, because the Cleverleys themselves are often not very nice.
Oh, they're awful. So, they're pretty rotten most of the time.
So I wondered if you could talk to us about sort of how you feel about George Cleverley, for instance. You know, do you like him? Do you not like him? Where sort of...
I do kind of like him. I think he's a man who's lost his way. That we see, there are several scenes in the book where we go back in time to who he was and who his family was before the advent of social media. So it's 5 different periods over the last sort of 20 years. And each of those scenes ends with, and at this particular moment, it'll be like the first Facebook post, the first tweet, the first Snapchat, the first TikTok. And we see who the family was, and that they were actually quite loving and quite connected. And George is, as I said, he's 60, and he has been, all of his life, he's been a lefty, he's been a liberal. He's always tried to, you know, do the right thing. He's named his eldest son after Nelson Mandela. His middle name is Fidel, after Fidel Castro. He owns 17 goats in Somalia. He goes on every Pride March. You know, he has absolutely asserted his liberalism throughout his life. And his downfall starts with one tweet where he's got a word wrong. And he's written this tweet as a supportive tweet. He goes into his solicitor's office, and he's having a conversation with the receptionist, and he's asking where the previous receptionist was. And he doesn't realize that the previous receptionist that has been there for many years is in fact the current receptionist who has transitioned. And he tweets a, you know, good for you, Aidan, you know, big support, live your best life, that type of thing. But because he has used the original name rather than the new name, he is vilified for it. And he has simply tried to say something kind and something supportive. And he, like many people, you know, cannot wake up every day and see which words I'm supposed to use and which words I'm not. But the pile-on for George is because people want a hate figure, you know, and he'll do. You know, he'll do. He said the wrong word, so he'll do. We'll go after him. And unfortunately, he's not. He's a bit like I was then. He's not going to take it lying down, and he then, you know, goes on a rampage of tweets, and
he makes it worse and worse.
He makes it a lot worse. He says
like watching a slow motion car crash. You know?
Yeah. But like he's basically an idiot, you know, and he just doesn't like he says things without thinking. But he's not a bad human being. He's just not educated in the way things are now. But a lot of the point in it is that the people who attack him so viciously, they're actually, I was saying to in Ireland the other day in an interview that I go back to that famous line of Sinead O'Connor's when she was on Saturday Night Live, and she ripped up the picture of the Pope, and she said, "Fight the real enemy." And this is what people forget. You know, George isn't the real enemy. When it came to my brother's name is Jessica, I'm not the enemy. You know, identify the enemy, fine, and try to change the enemy's mind without screaming abuse at them. But identify them first without just sort of picking people randomly and saying, you'll do. You know, we'll just go after you.
Yeah, it seems to me that social media makes everything so black and white. And I think what your novel does is it shows that actually everybody is shades of grey. You know, we're all good and we're all bad and we're all trying our best. And social media doesn't really allow for that sort of
there's no room for
subtlety.
nuance on it. And I think in general, if you followed me around, or if I followed any of you around for a day, from the moment you wake up until the moment you go to sleep, we all probably say a dozen stupid things that, you know, we wouldn't necessarily want memorialized forever in screenshots. You know, we all make a stupid joke, or we say something that we shouldn't say. And it doesn't necessarily mean that that person is a monster in some way. And, you know, I find the villainizing of people online just to be appalling. I just think, you know, you cannot define somebody's character in 280 characters. You know, you can't. You know, somebody can say something sarcastically, and it's, you know, there's just no nuance. And we won't do that in real life. You know, I could sit down, you know, in a pub with half a dozen of you tonight, never met before, and we could talk about, you know, anything, you know, Trump, climate change. Like back in the good old days, Brexit. Remember, simpler times. And you'll be more likely to have a conversation, you know, and to actually debate things back and forth. The one thing that we often say in real life that I guarantee you will never see online is somebody saying, nah, that's a good point. No, I take your point. No one ever does that online. It's always about defending our own points. Whereas in real life, we are more likely to do that. You know, if we were talking about something, we would be more likely to do that.
And how do you think all of this is going to affect the future of publishing? I mean, do you think that authors are going to become much more nervous about stepping outside their own experience, about featuring characters that, you know, are not likable? I mean, what do you think it means for storytelling?
I think everybody is nervous, but I think any writer worth his or her salt needs to put that aside. That, you know, you have to write the story that you have to write at that time. And the notion that we can only write from our own experience, I think, is a ridiculous notion. If we did that, everything is autobiography. You know, the whole point of writing or acting or anything like that is that we put ourselves in the lives of others. And imagine what that is. Now, we might write a really awful book, and we have the right to write an awful book, but it might be a good book too. But being told that you cannot write from the perspective of, like, you know, I'm like, what, like I'm 50-year-old Irish man. Am I only allowed to write about that? You know, and the corollary of that is if somebody is from like a real minority, Are they only allowed to write about that minority? I don't think so. I think they can write about anything they want. They can write about, Tudor times. They can write about science fiction. We all have the right to write anything we want. And after that, let the book be good, bad, or indifferent.
And how do you decide what to write next? Because your books are so varied. I mean, you talk to different age groups. You write in different styles. I mean, I wonder whether sometimes I feel like you're writing for, as therapy or catharsis, and sometimes it feels like you're making a point. I mean, what drives you most, do you think?
I think it's changed over the years. This week, 21 years ago this week, I published my first book. And I think the first 10 years of that, I was writing very kind of historical books, very storytelling books. And then around 2014, I wrote A History of Loneliness, which was my first book set in Ireland and about the child abuse scandals in the church in Ireland. And for the first time, I drew on my own experiences of things that happened to me in school and me growing up. And I started being a more autobiographical writer. And everything I've done since then has had some element of autobiography to it. This particularly, I think, because of maybe it sounds trivial to other people, but it was a traumatic experience in my life. And I think something good can come out of that. So I trust my instinct. I'm lucky enough to get a lot of ideas, I guess, because I read a lot and I write a lot. And I think your brain sort of changes in some way when you're doing that. It's trained to be open to stories. And I always know when I finish something, this is the idea I need to go with next. This is the one I want to write about. I just kind of trust myself instinctively on that. So
do you know already what you're going to write next?
Oh yeah, I'm already in the middle of it.
Oh,
yeah,
really?
Yeah.
I
don't know what I'm going to write next after that, but no, I'll keep it to myself now. But
fair enough.
Yeah, and it just seems to work out right for me. I think anytime I talk to young writers or aspiring writers and writing groups, I always say that if you're enjoying the writing, and if you feel like this is a story only you can tell, then the reader is going to feel that too. It's going to, if you have to force it, if you think, oh, I'll write a book about such and such because that seems to be what's popular at the moment. It's not going to be real.
Yeah, it's great advice.
And it'll read in an unreal way.
Right at the end of the book, there's a Kingsley Amis quote, which is fabulous, and it says, "If you're not annoying somebody with your writing, you're not doing anything right." And we sort of touched on that a bit already, but I wondered whether you were expecting this book to have any sort of backlash, and if so, are you ready for it?
I've actually been extremely disappointed by the lack of backlash. The reviews and everything, and even looking online, as I stupidly did over the last day or two, there hasn't been any negativity.
No, I haven't seen any.
No, and I thought, well, maybe it's because it's a comic novel. And I did think at the start, this is, you have to write it as a comedy. If you write it all po-faced and sort of woe is me, it's a bit self-pitying. But I don't think there is going to be a backlash, actually. I mean, I didn't think there was going to be with My Brother's Name is Jessica in it, but that got me. But no, I don't, I'm just not getting that sense. People seem to be just sort of enjoying it. And it's farcical and it's silly. It's got a serious point to it. But so far, people just seem to kind of be enjoying it.
And if it makes people feel differently, as it did with me, how would you want that difference to manifest? What do you want people to change about themselves, about the way they think, having read it?
I think just about reconnecting. I mean, we have been forced to do this in the last 18 months, reconnecting with our families, with our friends, with people we actually have in our lives and who will be there at the moment when you need somebody, not relying so much on the validation of strangers on your phone. And also just, I mean, it sounds a bit preachy, but like just not treating people in such a horrible way. It's like just stopping and thinking before, attacking a stranger. Well, yeah, and like there are people you see who seem to just spend their lives doing this. And you want them to sort of step away from it for a while and see, if you just stop for like a month and, go for a walk, learn a language, maybe you'll stop doing this and your life will be better. I don't get this. There's a line in the book that comes up several times, which is, has anybody ever said that their life is better by being on Twitter? Like if it's only going to make you miserable, why engage with it?
Do you think it can be a force for good?
Yes, I think it started out like that, and I think it could be. At the start, it was about amplifying the voices of those who had been historically disenfranchised, of equaling voices. So you could be a Nobel Prize winner or a prime minister, or you could be, just, a regular Joe Soap on the street. Everybody had access to the same platform. And the democratization, if I pronounce that right, of it is essentially a good thing. But we don't always use it in a good way. And again, I'm not preaching because I am myself guilty of this in the past, and you do learn and you say, I'm not going to do that again. I'm not going to use it to say something negative about somebody. But I do think at its best, yeah, it should be a force for good. I mean, like I've had plenty of positive experiences on it, interacting with readers, with writers, talking about books, or, just like kind of nice stuff, like that's a good thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, that's down to everybody, myself included. We are all responsible for our own behavior. I do think that the social media companies need to take more responsibility for what happens on them. I mean, I think banning Trump, whatever it was, 12 days before Joe Biden was sworn in, seemed to me about 5 years too late. Like, why not? Like, if people are going to be saying the kind of things that he would have said, why leave them there in the first place? If you have the authority or the ability to ban people for making, horribly racist comments, for example, then do it.
Yes, yes.
But they monetize people like that and give them this platform to say these things, and they won't ban them for the most part because they have so many followers.
Yeah.
Well, let's hope it all starts to change.
Yeah.
But I wanted to really open up questions to all of you guys here, and Ben, your people online, if I may.
I feel like, by the way, I'm making it sound so serious. It is actually funny. So,
I'd like to just raise one question that leads from your last comment in terms of who should be the arbiter to turn people on and off Twitter.
I mean, I don't have the answer to that. I just think there should be some way to stop that kind of thing happening. I don't know who. Maybe me. Maybe I should be the one. But but we're talking about in a perfect world.
Yeah.
But I think there should be some things that sort of should get you banned. And I think fake accounts.
Because
apparently
a lot of people very upset at the fact that Trump was turned off on the basis, he talks garbage most of the time. But whose right is it? Was it to turn him off? And that was the that's it. It's a very interesting debate.
Yeah. No, and I'm not even sure the answer to that. I'm not even, because it is difficult. Free speech, all that sort of thing. It's complicated. I don't know the answer. But,
exactly. Listen, I've got. I know there's a question over there. I've got one from Ruth McCracken. Do you have a different approach from writing for adults when writing for young adults?
No, I don't really. I never kind of make the language any different or the themes any less serious. In fact, the themes in my young adult books, 3 of them are about war, one about a child who runs away, who's grief-stricken, the trans book, I don't. The only difference, I suppose, is I place a child at the center of a very adult experience in what I consider the YA books, and I don't have a child at the center of the story in what I consider the adult books. Yes, sir.
Wait for the microphone. You will. Kevin, the virtual crowd will want to hear you.
Hi, John. Welcome to the non-virtual world.
Alison, can you turn the red button on? Sorry.
I'll just repeat that. John, welcome to the
Thank you.
the non-virtual world. Great to see a writer again. Now, I've got to confess that I have not read any of your books, and I only found out you were doing
we can
this
wait.
about 2
We
hours
can
ago.
sit and wait while you read.
But we have bought one tonight, so there's good. And we've got one that was in the house that my daughter has failed to read, and I'd like you to kind of put something on that's useful.
Please read me.
Exactly, read the flimsy book. No, I'd like to ask you, because anytime I read, I like that, dialogue is really important, and the veracity of dialogue is really important. And you're writing so many different kinds of books. How do you get, the authentic voice? Because that's really a big challenge. How do you do it?
I think a lot of it is in like rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. That I would do so many drafts of each book, and I read them aloud a lot at home as I'm editing, to kind of hear the rhythm of it, because eventually you end up standing, say, here and reading it out, and you want it to sound right. And I think when you're like on an average day, when I'm at home, say working on something, I'm very lost inside it. I'm not easily distracted. I'm very in it, and with, I guess, experience and confidence in oneself and knowing how to do it, you just kind of get better at it. But I do always think reading it aloud is a really helpful thing to do.
I've got, do put your hand up, audience, if you've got any questions. I've got a few on the virtual crowd. This is a long one. EL, from the boy in the striped pajamas, Heart's Invisible Furies, A Traveller at the Gates of Wisdom, and now Echo Chamber. Such diversity and so much knowledge about many different subjects, all with such intuition. Where do the ideas come from, and how much time do you end up investing in research before the book is complete? Liz in a soggy village outside Tring.
These latter books have not really been research heavy, unlike the books I wrote at the start of my career, which were, because they were so historically based. So I don't really need to do a huge amount of research. I prefer to just sort of sit down, start writing, and then maybe at the end of the first draft, all the things that you don't know that you need to go and find out. But like Ladder to the Sky was, about publishing, and I've been in it for 20-something years, so I didn't need to research that. The Heart's Invisible Furies was, about growing up gay in Ireland. I didn't need to research that. History of Loneliness, I lived. This one I lived. So like I said, I've become more autobiographical, so it doesn't feel like I have to research that much. But they take about, I seem to publish a book every year, but it's not by intention. It's just they seem to come together in that space of time. I consider myself quite hardworking. I'm quite disciplined in my daily life, and also I still love it. I'm just not one of those people. I'm not one of those writers who says I hate writing. I don't actually. I love writing. I feel at my best when I'm in the middle of a book, and I feel incredibly lucky to be able to do it and to have an audience for it.
John, we've got a question over there.
Hi, it's great to have you here. I absolutely love your books, and I think one of the things I think is so fantastic is kind of the way that they're structured, and I just wondered, particularly Heart's Invisible Furies and The History of Loneliness, did you really sort of plan that out before you started it, or did the kind of structure kind of come to you as you were writing?
Well, with Heart's Invisible Furies, for those who haven't read it, it works in 7-year leaps. So it starts in 1945, the end of the war in Ireland, and it finishes in 2015 at the equal rights marriage referendum. So we've got 10 chapters every 7 years. And I did plan that in advance. I thought, I wanted to look at how Ireland had changed and how it had become, having gone from such a conservative Catholic country to being the first country in the world to actually vote by public plebiscite for equal rights marriage. I wanted to understand that. So I thought, end of the war is a good place to start. 2015, that's 70 years. And I just thought, 7-year leaps would be good. They also say that we shed our skin every 7 years. We have a whole new cell structure and all that. Maybe not cell structure, but skin anyway, every 7 years. So like Cyril would be almost a different person with each 7-year gap. So I had that plan there. History of Loneliness, I have to think for myself for a moment, because that starts in the present day, of course, with Father Odrin going to see his sister, and then back and forth and back and forth. Yeah, no, I planned that too, and I thought, you know, I wanted him to be the narrator here in 2015 or something, telling the story, but to keep going back in time and the two stories moving forward. So yeah, I do tend to plan those structures, and Ladder to the Sky, the 3 sections, I had that very much at the start. I didn't have the 2 interludes. That came to me after I wrote 3, but I thought it was a nice structure to work with.
I've got a lovely question from Carolyn. A History of Loneliness left me feeling really sad on your behalf. Are you in a happier place now, apart from Twitter, of course, she puts in brackets?
Much happier place, much happier place. Yeah, like it was a cathartic book to write, and you know, I've done what I have to do with the Guards in Ireland in terms of my story and my experiences, and I couldn't have written that book when I was 25 or 30, but I could write it when I was 40, and I'm really proud of that one. And yeah, no, I'm in pretty good form.
Brilliant.
You know, for the most part.
All right.
Another question over there.
Thanks very much indeed for coming. It's great to see you. I've spent the last couple of days with the Cleverleys, and it's a great funny book, as you said, but it's also, I think, a very insightful book about the UK as we're sort of in the middle of the culture wars, as we seem to be at the moment. It's in some ways it's quite a depressing view of the UK, and I wondered whether that was what you'd intended. And I'm wondering, do you see a way through and out the other side of the culture wars for the UK? I wondered whether there was something about the standards of education in the country that was in your mind.
Well, I have to say firstly that Ireland isn't any different. You know, the same thing, we're very close obviously, and the same things that are going on here are going on there. I do think that these things become very cyclical. You know, that like 20 years ago, we used the phrase political correctness, which we never use that phrase anymore. And it seemed to kind of go away, and then it became, people used the word woke. And, you know, in a way, the shame is that a lot of people use that in a pejorative way, when actually, like what we were saying earlier about, you know, Twitter starting out with good intentions. The whole point of wokeness, as they say, was an equaling of society. And, you know, the raising up of voices that had not been heard before, and not taking privilege away from those who'd always had it, but leveling out that privilege and making sure that everybody would have it. So, you know, I know I joke about it a bit in the book, but you know, there are people in the culture, in the media, you know, he's not related to anybody here, but sort of the Lawrence Foxes of this world, so to speak, who will use that as a pejorative and like condemn people for it, when actually at its basic substance, it's a good thing. So I think when people stop, I think the way out of it is, like we were saying earlier, it's just stop demonizing people. Stop, you know, we have to be able to listen to each other, hold opinions. You know, it can be something like, and I won't even express an opinion on this, but it can be something like the transgender weightlifter in the Olympics, right? Where, you know, there'll be so much about that online, and there's so many people who will have a particular opinion on it. But each person who has an opinion on it seems to feel that anybody who has the opposite opinion is the worst person in the world. And, you know, we're not, any of us, that. You know, like, we have to be able to talk about things like that in a more respectful way, and a you know, a more thoughtful way. And that's the way out of it, I think, rather than having to win an argument. People are everybody wants to win the arguments, and it's, you know, I'm not sure there's an awful lot in the victory.
I've got, I'll do one from here, and then Claire asked, do you know any authors in real life, anything like the main character, Morris, in Ladder to the Sky?
I did actually base Morris on a real life person, and I've never revealed who that real person is.
Oh,
it's
go
my
on.
sort of "you're so vain"
We won't tell anyone.
moment, but it's all there. It's even in his name. Yeah, I have known many people. I mean, you know, you meet people along the way, and funny things happen. I'll give you a good example of it with Ladder to Sky. I'm not sure if I used this story in Ladder to Sky, but I know of a writer who, when he gets up to read, takes his glasses and puts his glasses on and reads, and sits down, takes his glasses off. But there's no prescription in them. They're actually glass. And these do have a prescription, I swear. But he puts them on to read because I think he thinks it makes him look more intellectual. And somebody had said this to me, and I was doing a thing with him, and we were in like the green room before it, and he went to Lewis glasses, and I took them up and I put them on, and they were glass. They were not real. And you know, so you get people like that a lot doing those kind of things. I mean, these kind of, you're not doing anybody any harm, I guess. But so.
There's a question here.
Hi, John.
Hi.
I wonder how much do you read and what do you read?
Oh, I'm a voracious reader, and I always have been since I was a child. And for most of my life, I've really kept up with contemporary fiction. You know, I've always kind of on top of whatever's being reviewed and what people are talking about. I have to say, in the last year, during lockdown and everything, I went back to classics that I've never read before. And I got a bit, I just felt like I needed a break from a lot of books that I felt were being kind of overpraised and overhyped, and that didn't seem to have a huge amount inside them. So I started reading things like Moby Dick and Persuasion and Farewell to Arms, books I'd just never read in my life. And I've quite enjoyed doing that, actually, just going back to those. At the moment, though, I am reading a contemporary one. There's one in my bag there, a book called Widowland by C.J. Carey, which is, it's one of those sort of, you know, had Germany won the war books, one of those kind of things, which I always kind of find fascinating, the alternative history. But it's one about the Germans have taken over, and it's the 1950s, and what they're trying to do is get rid of all the books that have been written by women over the years, because they're not, it's very Handmaid's Tale-ish. They don't want women having any voice, so the central character has to, there are some books they feel that you can't erase from the culture, books like, you know, Middlemarch or Pride and Prejudice, Wuthering Heights, so the central character has to rewrite them, where the women aren't as strong. It's actually really good. I'm quite enjoying it.
There's one over here.
Another question from Tring.
Out of all the books that you've written, is there one that you're most proud of, and why?
I think the one I'm most proud of is probably The Heart's Invisible Furies. I think, you know, it's a long book. It's, to my surprise, I actually looked recently that Moby Dick is 201,000 words and Heart's Invisible Furies is 203. So
wow.
I don't think you'd know it, you know.
It doesn't feel that long.
No, but it also doesn't look that on the shelf, you know, but I think it's a long book, but I think it just holds together, if I can say so myself. I think it holds together well. And I like the character of Cyril and the things he goes through, and his optimism, and the fact that he's not a saint, that he makes some terrible mistakes along the way, and he damages some people's lives along the way. But we all do, you know, we all have things that we feel really proud of, and things we look back on, I think, and say, you know, wish I hadn't done that. And I think it's the one that people talk to me most about, more than Striped Pajamas even. People talk to me about The Heart's Invisible Furies. So yeah, probably that one.
If you've read The Heart's Invisible Furies, you'll see that there are some references to Maud Avery in the Echo Chamber, which I really enjoyed. So she does appear briefly.
Yes.
So I read Heart's Invisible Furies on holiday. I got back from holiday this week, and Maud Avery, I kept Googling her, trying to find whether she really existed or not, but
Yeah.
clearly not. But can I just ask you about one point in the book, actually? It's the confessional scene.
Yes.
Is that based on a true story, or is
No.
that's the funniest thing I've ever read?
That's the scene when I was, you know, promoting that book, that's the scene I always read. aloud. And, you know, occasionally you find yourself in a place like this, a church, and it's a confession scene, and it's a 14-year-old boy confessing to a priest. And the things he confesses makes the priest fall out of the box, and he has a heart attack and dies. And it's always a really good scene to read, but particularly in a church.
Fantastic. There's another question over there. We're going to wrap it up in 2 or 3 minutes, but let's have any last questions now.
Sorry, I'm very late to this. That scene you've just mentioned. So my partner reads way too many books. I don't. But he said to me, he was laughing in bed one night, and he read that scene out. And so I was like, oh God, so I'll have to read this thing. So to me, reading means going to Audible. So I went to Audible, and my question for you really is, do you have any say in the narrator? So for example, Hearts and Invisible Furies, fantastic narrator, the right accent and delivery. Your new book, it's got Richard E. Grant, but your delivery at the platform there just blew me away compared to what I've just started to listen to on Audible. So how do you engage? Do they bring you a load of people?
What happens is the Audible people and your publisher, they ask first off if there's anybody that you think, you know, you have in mind for it, and then you might suggest somebody if you did. I had one particular actor in mind for this. Like, I don't know if you may know Roger Alam, who's a really terrific actor, and I felt he was very George Cleverly-ish, but he was tied up, I think, and you know, we got Richard E. Grant, so that was fine. But they send you a list of people that you know are up for these kind of jobs, and you can kind of go 1, 2, 3, and then they go back to them and they say, would you be interested? And you get somebody. I've never done my own, no, and I don't know. I love reading aloud, but I don't know why I've never done my own. Some people do, you know. Don't really have any
It's much harder than it looks.
Yeah.
I think.
And I have to say, on Audible, you know, I never used to listen to audiobooks, but again during lockdown, I decided I was going to give that a go, and like, you know, I guess we were all kind of going for walks every day and stuff. And, you know, I was trying to go for like 2 or 3 walks each day, and I started doing that, started listening to audiobooks, and I got really into it, actually. And I found for me, I needed it to be kind of more sort of thrillery type books in a way that, you know, I could kind of let the action happen, you know, rather than say maybe a John Banville novel that, you know, I wanted to, you know, very much concentrate on. But I got really into Audible, actually, during this whole experience.
Ben, do we have time for any more questions? Or?
If anyone's got a quick question, one more.
One over here. Should we make this the last one?
Yep, absolutely.
No pressure.
Hi, John.
Hi.
Thank you for such an interesting talk. It's been wonderful. I just wanted to ask, when you're thinking about character construction in your novels, where do you go for inspiration? Like, are your characters drawn on people that you know or other authors? And I just think that your characters are always constructed so vividly, and I'm just interested to know how they came about.
I very rarely base them on other people. I find that they form on the page before me, either through their dialogue or through their actions. And that's, again, like I said earlier with the rewriting, that you put some line into the mouth and you kind of get an idea of it. Sometimes you often hear about an actor saying that maybe they put on an outfit, a clothes or a hat or something, and it gives them the sense of who that person is. For me, it's those kind of lines of dialogue. Again, it has to, it's these things I think are very hard to explain. It's like the kind of, you know, where do you get the ideas from thing. It's a mystery, and should probably remain a mystery. You know, it's just concentrating and letting it flow and letting it something authentic happen, and being brutal about cutting anything that doesn't sound real, that, you know, doesn't sound like something that person would say.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for being such a fabulous audience and for such wonderful questions, and thank you most of all to John for coming all the way here to talk to us this evening and sharing your wisdom, your humour, your honesty. We really appreciate it. You've been amazing. Thank you.
And thank you, Claire. Thank you.
And a massive thank you to the virtual crowd as well for joining in. And thank you to Clare, Clare Pooley, for stepping in. Clare's book, Authenticity Project, was one of our books of the month a few months ago. And it's a brilliant book as well. And we've got a little pile of those as well, should anyone want a signed one. Without further ado, give us a couple of moments just to clear this table. This will be the signing desk, and John will come and sit down here. And I need to move this. Virtual crowd, your event is pretty much over. We'll leave the stream live for another sort of 10 minutes or so, just so you don't feel entirely left out. But thank you again, and we'll the next event, gosh, who's next? I can't remember. Oh, hang on, it's you. It's Clare Swadman. We're doing an event in the Bookshop next. So Claire's in the Bookshop next week, and Linda, I think, I can't remember who's after that. Linda LaPlante, yes, of course, is coming in 3 weeks' time. So she'll be in here doing a virtual event. That's the rather stumbling way of finishing the event. But thank you all, and let's get cleared now. Thank you.